Everyone praised me for saving the children from the streets, but no one knew my real reason for doing it. I am Sister Agnès. They call me the Angel of Montmartre, a living saint. They are not entirely wrong, but they only understand half of the story, the half they want to hear. They do not understand that a true saint does not merely dispense pity. A true saint must shape the world in their own image. I sit here now, in the silence of this room, nearing the end of my road. Around me, on the oak shelves, are the leather-bound books written about my life. I can trace the gold lettering of my name on their spines. They praise what they call my marathon of compassion. A marathon? Yes. But my finish line was not heaven. It was an empire, built from what society had discarded. Orphans. You have to understand Paris after the war. It was a chaotic mess that reeked of damp coal and desperation. The children were shadows with eyes, hiding in the alleyways. And in that chaos, pity was the most useless of luxuries. It was a sweet poison, creating only helpless dependents, crippled creatures waiting their entire lives for a handout. I was different. I learned to see through the filth. When I looked directly into the eyes of a starving child, I did not see a pitiful soul in need of saving. I saw a fire, a raw hunger, and I recognized it immediately. That was not a weakness. It was a weapon, waiting to be sharpened. So, I did not give them a fish. I taught them how to seize the entire ocean. To accomplish this, the first task was to sort the seeds. From the first day a child arrived at the Sparrow's nest, after they were washed and given a full meal, they would be brought to the common room. I would sit in a corner, in silence, and watch. Always I would watch. First, there were the roses with thorns, the beautiful little girls. But beauty alone is useless. It is cheap and fleeting. I was looking for something else. I did not teach them about virtue. Pointless. Instead, I taught them about the power of their appearance. Like Isabel, who did not cry when they brought her to me. She simply watched the other children with her melancholy eyes. That was control. Or Fleur, who knew precisely when to offer a smile to receive an extra piece of bread. That was instinct. Their lessons did not take place in a classroom. I would invite wealthy ladies for tea. I taught the children how to pour the tea, how to place a cup on its saucer without making a sound. That was not a lesson in etiquette. It was a lesson in poise and grace under pressure. Their chapel was not a room with a cross. It was the lavish drawing rooms where they learned to conquer powerful men with a single glance, a well-timed word. And then there were the wild wolves, the sharp, fearless boys. I did not teach them to be obedient. Obedience is a virtue for sheep, and sheep are meant for slaughter. I looked for cunning, for a hidden ruthlessness. Luke, when he first arrived, did not fight for food with the crowd. He stood in the corner, watching. And when a weaker boy got a piece of bread, Luke simply walked over and took it, without a single word. Claude was different. He used his fists. Each had his own method, but the goal was the same. Their playground was not the sunny courtyard of the orphanage. I would intentionally leave the door to the storeroom slightly ajar. It was a test. Whichever child snuck in would not be punished. I only wanted to see how he did it. Did he leave a trace? Did he take too much? Their true playground was the dark alleys outside the walls, where I sent them to deliver packages. They learned to spot undercover policemen, to memorize the schedules of delivery trucks, and most importantly, they learned that information and secrets were the most powerful currency of all. The television in the nursing home's common room is showing a program about charity galas. I watch the women in silk and diamonds, smiling their hollow smiles for the camera. They remind me of the ones who used to visit the Sparrow's nest. That facade, of course, was a masterpiece. To the outside world, I was a gentle nun. The press, those fools, called me the tireless mother of Paris. Wealthy ladies in expensive fur coats would come, take my hands, and shed crocodile tears over my devotion. They saw clean children who bowed respectfully as they passed, and whispered about the love of God. How foolish they were. They saw miracles where, in reality, there was only my iron discipline. Their practical lessons took place right behind their backs, running parallel to that hypocritical performance. Tuesdays were for lessons on value. I would place 2 necklaces on a piece of black velvet. One real, one fake. I did not need to say anything. Isabel, the cleverest one, would pick them up herself, feel their weight, examine the cut of the stones in the light. "This one, mother," she would say. "It's colder." I would nod. We did not need a doll. We needed a queen. The boys' gardening lessons were the same. Their garden had no roses, it had walls. The stone wall behind the orphanage, tall and slick. I would stand there with a stopwatch. "Claude," I would say. "Up." The demand was not for speed. Speed is for thieves. The demand was for silence. Silence is for those in power. If he dislodged a single pebble, he had to start over. Sometimes, I would simply place a hairpin next to the old storeroom lock. I said nothing. Luke understood. A silent test. But real power was built on Saturday nights. We called it the hour of confession. The children did not go to the chapel. They lined up outside my office, where the oak door was always kept closed. One by one, they would enter and sit in the single chair facing my desk. They did not confess to God. They reported to me. "Mother," Fleur would whisper, her voice sweet, "Madame Dubois visited today. She complained to her friend that her husband just bought a piece of land near the port, and she hates the smell of fish." "Mother," Luke would say, his voice flat, emotionless. "The delivery truck for the bakery was 3 hours late today. The driver spoke to a strange man at the end of the alley. The man had a scar on his left hand. They were my eyes and ears. Every overheard conversation, every strange license plate, every habit of the powerful, they brought it all back to me. I would listen, nod, and piece together these priceless fragments. Slowly, a map began to form in my mind. Not a map of the streets of Paris, but a map of the city's power, its secrets, and its weaknesses. And I was the only one who held it. And I watched them grow with pride. I saw that Isabel was no longer a doll who simply blinked. Her gaze now had weight. She knew how to use silence to force others to fill the void with their own secrets. I saw that Luke was no longer a petty thief. He moved through rooms unnoticed. His silence was no longer a sign of fear, but a tool for observation. They were no longer victims. They were becoming predators. People would say I destroyed their childhoods. Childhood? Is childhood dying of measles in a cold attic? Or being sold to work in a factory for a few coins? Is that the childhood they wanted me to protect? I destroyed nothing. I performed a surgery. I cut away a childhood of poverty and sickness to give them a future where they would never have to bow to anyone. I was arming them to fight in a world without pity. That is true compassion. The first harvest came the year Isabel turned 18. I arranged a chance meeting at a charity concert with a banking baron, an old, wealthy and lonely man. 6 months later, she became the Baroness. A year after that, he died suddenly of a heart attack. Such a terrible tragedy. A few weeks later, a cheque arrived at the Sparrow's nest in an unmarked envelope. The number written on it was enough to rebuild the entire east wing and line the main hall with marble. Such a dutiful daughter. Luke was different. He did not send banknotes. He sent names, shipping schedules, fraudulent ledgers. He became the keeper of all secrets at the port of Marseille, and he shared those secrets with me. That was worth far more than gold. And then, the pinnacle of glory arrived. I remember that day clearly, in the Élysée Palace. The French government awarded me the Legion of Honor, the highest distinction. The president himself pinned the medal to my habit. He shook my hand, his eyes filled with genuine admiration, and said, "Sister, you are the embodiment of France." I smiled and thanked him. Of course I was. I was France, elegant and ornate on the outside, but thoroughly calculating and pragmatic within. The Sparrow's nest became a legend, and I was the living saint of that legend. Then one day, Luke returned. I was in my office, reviewing the donation ledgers, when a strange sound broke the familiar silence. The crunch of gravel outside. Not the hurried footsteps of the children, nor the loud engine of a delivery truck. This was the slow, heavy, powerful roll of tires. I put down my pen and narrowed my eyes, looking through the window. It was not a stolen delivery truck. It was a black Bentley, silent and majestic, like a panther resting in the middle of the Sparrow's playground. The door opened, slowly, and he stepped out. Time seemed to lose all meaning. He was no longer the skinny boy with constantly alert eyes. He was a gentleman, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his leather shoes so polished they reflected the grey Parisian sky. He moved with a cold confidence, a poise that I myself had painstakingly forged in him. He walked straight into the Sparrow's nest, not even glancing at the curious children pressed against the walls to watch him. He walked straight to my office. He did not knock. He simply opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind him. The sound of the latch clicking into place echoed in the quiet room like a full stop. He sat down in the chair opposite me, the same chair where he and the other children once sat to give their reports, to receive their orders. But this time, he did not sit like a student. He leaned back, comfortable, possessive, and then he smiled. A smile I had taught him how to use, revealing no emotion, serving only as a tool to hide his true intentions. "You taught me that everything has its price, Mother," he said, his voice calm, without a single ripple. "You taught me that loyalty can be bought for a higher one." He paused for a moment, looking directly into my eyes, as if savouring this moment. I learned my lessons well. For a moment, I did not feel betrayed. I felt a cold admiration. I had built a machine, and now, that machine had developed a mind of its own. "Isabel was the first," he continued, as if reading from a business report. "She was tired of sending checks. I offered her something better, freedom from your letters, Mother." He had used the very information network I taught him to build, to get one step ahead of me. He knew all about the roses with thorns, about the other wolves. He had contacted all of them, not as an old brother, but as a new employer. He did not threaten them. He did not use violence. He simply offered a better price. Claude wanted an empire, not just the alleyways. I gave him the southern port. Fleur wanted to be safe. I eliminated her husband's enemies. He named them one by one, as if listing his accomplishments. He had bought their loyalty, brick by brick, from the very empire I had built. He had purchased their very souls right from under my nose. He had not come to repay a debt. He had come to succeed me. I remained silent, not out of shock, but because I was admiring the perfection of the moment. The alpha wolf had returned to claim the territory. It was the law of nature, a law that I myself had taught him. Any emotion other than cold admiration would have been pointless. "From now on, I will be running the Sparrow's nest," Luke declared calmly, as if announcing the weather. He stood up and walked around the office, running his hand over the spines of the ledgers I had kept for so many years. "But I will not be teaching them how to pick locks. I will be teaching them how to build them." He paused by the window, looking out at the playground where the children were playing. "I will turn this place into an academy. The brightest, most talented children will be sent here. They will study economics, law, politics. They will become bankers, judges, ministers. I will give them legitimate power, the kind of power you never had, Mother." I knew at once what he planned to do. He would continue my work, but in a more sophisticated, cleaner way. He would replace the lessons in the shadows with lectures in university halls. He was turning my wild, thorny masterpiece into something mediocre and socially acceptable. Expose me? He would not do that. It would be too crude, too messy, like smashing the chisel that carved a perfect statue. He was too clever for that. Instead, he brought me here, to this luxurious nursing home. My departure took place in silence, not a single goodbye. The next morning, the black Bentley was waiting. Luke opened the car door for me himself. "This is a final courtesy," he said, without looking me in the eye. He set me up like a queen. My room is the finest, with a balcony overlooking a garden trimmed so perfectly not a single leaf is out of place. The nurses bow when I pass. The food is always warm. This is not a prison. It is a gilded cage. He turned me into an icon, a retired saint, for everyone to continue admiring without ever knowing the truth. He let my legend live on, while stripping away all the power that created it. It was the most malicious and perfect revenge. He did not take my life. He took my purpose and forced me to sit here and watch my legacy be rewritten. Now, I often sit on the balcony for hours, watching the diligent gardeners trim every branch into a precise shape, a beautiful order, but soulless. And I smile. The world, if it knew, would say I had failed, devoured by the very monster I created. How shallow they are. A true artist does not grieve when their work leaves the studio. They take pride when it achieves worldwide recognition, even when it eclipses its creator's fame. Luke is not my failure. He is my greatest masterpiece. I created a king from a beggar boy. What greater glory could there possibly be? He had not come to repay a debt. He had come to succeed me. And then he did something I could never have anticipated. He did not cast me out, nor did he imprison me. He simply demanded that I remain in my old office. "You have worked your entire life, Mother," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Now it is time for you to rest and watch." That was my sentence. Not prison, not death, but a front row seat, helpless, to watch him dismantle my entire legacy, brick by brick. He began by having the grey walls repainted. He filled the library with adventure books and fairy tales instead of business reports. He turned my confession room, where I held absolute power, into a music room. Sometimes I could hear the clumsy sound of a piano drifting from it, a weak sound. At first, all I felt was contempt. I watched the new children he brought in, taught about kindness, about sharing. I saw them help each other up when they fell. I saw them share a single cookie. Sheep, I told myself. The world out there will tear them to pieces. But then, something strange began to happen. One afternoon I was sitting in my old armchair, looking out at the courtyard, when I saw a little girl drop her rag doll into a puddle of mud. The little girl just stood there, about to cry. I waited. I waited for another child to walk by and step on the doll, or to laugh at her. That is what my children would have done. But no, an older boy ran over. He picked the doll up, wiped the mud off with his own sleeve, and gave it back to her. I sat there, stunned. I could not comprehend the act. There was no benefit to it. It was not an exchange. It was simply kindness, something I had removed from my equation a long time ago. Day by day, I witnessed more such acts. Small, meaningless actions by my standards, but together they wove an entirely different tapestry, a tapestry of trust. The final blow came one winter day. I had a cough, and no one had noticed. I sat in my room, cold and alone. The door opened quietly. It was one of the new children, a skinny little girl with a tiny braid. She stepped inside timidly, clutching a mug in both hands. "I heard you coughing, Mother," she whispered. "I brought you some hot tea." She placed the mug on the table in front of me. Steam rose from it, carrying the scent of honey. Her tiny hands were trembling. She wanted nothing. There was no scheme, no agenda behind the act. And that is when I broke. I looked into the little girl's clear eyes. I had spent my entire life teaching children how to look into someone's eyes and find their weakness. But this little girl, she just looked at me and saw an old woman who was cold. I was wrong. I had not armed them. I had crippled them. I robbed them of the ability to feel the simplest things, the warmth from a cup of tea, the worth of a kind act. I had turned them into flawed copies of the emptiness inside of me. I had created monsters, while Luke, by going against everything I taught, was creating human beings. The price I had to pay was not the loss of my empire. It was living long enough to realize that the glory I chased my entire life was in fact nothing but ashes. And that is when I broke. I looked into the little girl's clear eyes. I had spent my entire life teaching children how to look into someone's eyes and find their weakness. But this little girl, she just looked at me and saw an old woman who was cold. I was wrong. I had not armed them. I had crippled them. I robbed them of the ability to feel the simplest things, the warmth from a cup of tea, the worth of a kind act. I had turned them into flawed copies of the emptiness inside of me. I had created monsters, while Luke, by going against everything I taught, was creating human beings. The price I had to pay was not the loss of my empire. It was living long enough to realize that the glory I chased my entire life was, in fact, nothing but ashes. After that day, everything changed. The torture was no longer watching my legacy be destroyed. The torture was that I began to agree with its destruction. I looked at the children playing in the courtyard, and for the first time, I did not see weak sheep. I saw joy. I heard their laughter, and instead of feeling disgust, I felt a painful pang of envy. When my former children, Isabel, Fleur, came to visit, I no longer saw pride in them. I saw perfect, but hollow, machines. They had money and status, but they did not know how to genuinely smile. Their smiles were still the weapons I had forged. I looked at them and saw only failed versions of myself. Luke still visited me weekly. He still sat in that chair, but our conversations had changed. He still told me about the new successes. Simon, the new little boy, he won a music scholarship. Elise, the girl who is always reading in the corner, she wants to be a writer. Before, I would have scoffed at such trivial achievements, but now I just listened in silence. One time, I summoned all my courage, lifted my head, and looked him straight in the eye, the alpha wolf I had created. "Luke," I asked, my voice trembling, a weakness I had never allowed myself to show. "These children, are they happy?" Luke froze. He looked at me for a long time, a profound gaze, as if he were truly seeing me for the first time. He did not answer right away. He just gave a slight nod. "That is the one thing you never asked, Mother," he said, then stood up and left. Those words were more painful than any punishment. Now, I sit here, in this silent room. I no longer think about my lost empire. I think about the hot tea, about a child's small hand. I think about happiness, a concept I had deemed useless, but which is now the only thing I long for and can never have. This is true hell, not fire and brimstone, but clarity. It is having to live with the knowledge that I had the chance to be a true saint, but instead, I chose to be a demon, and I succeeded brilliantly.